killed by a shot in the head or a heavy blow to the skull.
Hey, True Believers. Chris Mack coming at you with a movie that I vaguely remember seeing growing up. And then when I finally got the box set and sat down and really watched it, thoroughly enjoyed. I'm talking about Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, The Dream Warriors. Now, I remember me and the Mrs., we sat down and we watched the sequel, which I thought was called Freddy's Revenge. I'm not 100% sure on that. And to me, it was boring. Because the ending of 1, where it allegedly shows Nancy being killed and her mother being killed, like everybody dying, you're just thinking, oh, wow, what's going on here? And it reminded me how they always ended most of the Phantasm films. And then, second film starts and they said that Nancy went crazy, etc., so forth. And the main lead for that film just did not carry it the way that, the cast of the original one did. Now, they brought Wes Craven back for Dream Warriors. And here's a funny little tidbit. When he wrote the first draft, he wanted to make it meta. He wanted to do Freddy in the real world, killing off the cast of Nightmare on Elm Street. Well, that was rejected, and they went back to the drawing board and did the Dream Warrior effect. But the reason I bring that up is that plot sounds familiar to you. That's from Wes Craven's A New Nightmare, which I enjoyed. So just a little bit of trivia for you. Now for the film itself, February 1987, directed by Chuck Russell. It opens up with Kristen, who's played by Patricia Arquette, and you see her working on this house. And if you look and you really start to pay attention, you notice that it's Nancy's house. And what I like, and this is what a lot of modern filmmakers don't seem to grasp, and we'll continue with this theme throughout the movie, is how to use subtext. You see Nancy downing straight coffee beans with Coke. Not cocaine, but Coca-Cola, and you're just thinking, holy crap, this girl is not going to sleep. And then the mom coming in at 1 a.m. trying to get her in bed, and you're thinking that the mother's being caring, but then you realize that she wants Nancy to go to bed because she has a gentleman caller. Now, what do I mean by subtext in this? Children kind of doing things on their own, taking substances they really shouldn't, parents being promiscuous and their kids kind of becoming this back burner type thing. And that was a very prominent, or at least was explored more in the 80s, single parents taking care of their kids and trying to have their own life, and the kids kind of having their, left to their own devices. And when she enters the dream world with Freddy, which I'm still trying to figure out, how did she fall asleep after all that coffee and sugar? Suspension of belief. Gotta have that. I like the way that first, the chase scene, you don't see Freddy, you just see silhouette. It's a nice little buildup. And it's not until you think that Kristen's awake and she's in the bathroom, and Freddy's got her by the hand, they finally see him in the mirror, and it's like maybe 2 minutes later that you finally get to see our antagonist of the film. Now, going back to themes, when the mother busts in, you see Kristen with a bleeding wrist and a razor blade in her hand. Again, a theme that was very, and still is, a very touchy subject about teen suicide. And that's how the film opens. And a lot of modern films, they don't know how to convey this to make it feel organic in terms of the movie. In this, it's Freddy trying to kill her, and then when you come back and you see her wrist slit and she has a razor blade, the mom thinks she's suicidal. Well, there's the real world, touching on real world matters inside of a movie. A lot of filmmakers don't get that anymore, and it's sad, and that's why a lot of movies fall short, because they don't know how to add that extra layer. So majority of the film takes place in Weston Hills Psychiatric Hospital. Sorry, I've not had enough coffee. And here you start to meet a lot of the main cast. You meet Joey Crisell, played by Rodney Eastman. He's a mute. You meet Jennifer Caulfield, Penelope Sudrow, Philip Anderson, played by Bradley Gregg, Ronald Kincaid, played by Ken Sagos, and Taryn White, played by Jennifer Rubin, and Will Stanton, played by Ira Hayden, and Dr. Neil Gordon, Craig Wessel. Now, the one that threw me off the most is you meet the orderly, Max, who's a much, much younger Lawrence Fishburne, and I'm like, uh-oh, So this is how he got in the Matrix. Now, the reason I kind of just wanted to go through the list of the characters right here off the bat is I gave this example during our Banana Splits movie. How, again, going back to modern films, they don't know how to give depth to the cast that we're about to see. I mean, ultimately, we know they're all going to die for the most part. But in this film, compared to modern films, give us a reason to care about these characters. For example, Philip. He's into puppets, and he's kind of a smart mouth. He shares a room with Ronald. And you can kind of see how they interact with one another, how they rip on each other for the mental illnesses that they allegedly have. And it just, in that second or two, creates this organic world. The same thing with Taryn. You come to find out that she has a problem with drug use, and so she's trying her best to stay clean. There's a scene later on where one of the orderlies tries to hit on her and says, "Hey, I have the key to the drug locker." And she's like, "Leave me alone." So you can see how she's trying to clean her life up and how there's all these little temptations trying to draw her back in. And just in that minute or two scene with the orderly, you feel for her, especially what happens later in the movie with Freddy when he says a relatively famous line where he goes, "Let's get high." And yeah, it's sad what happens to Taryn. And the same thing with Jennifer. You see that she wants to become an actress. And Joey, he's really good with puppetry. Ronald, he's just kind of this very strong, independent-minded guy. Joey, he's a mute. Something traumatic happened to him and he won't speak. And then Will, he's very much the geek of the group, which is okay with, it's a man after my own heart. He's very much into Dungeons and Dragons. Everybody plays with him and nobody hates each other. They all are bonded by these haunting nightmares that they have. And so after we're introduced to this cast and we get, again, depth on them, Jennifer is kind of the new girl in terms for the audience to see this world. And she's terrified to go to sleep. And it's not until Nancy, again played by Heather Langenkamp, comes in and finishes the Freddy nursery rhyme that she keeps saying. And here, this is what I'm talking about, where this very much negates the ending of one. Again, I like the way one ended because then it makes you wonder, is it a dream? Did it really happen? It films like that, a lot of movies nowadays, they want you to have a nice, happy bow, put an all's well that ends well type ending, and it kills a lot of movies. So the first one, you're just left with this this pit of dread in your stomach. And then for two to reference that Nancy went insane, but now she's back. So I'm wondering if Craven kind of played off, because he wasn't part of two. He wanted one to be a self-contained movie. Why he came back? Probably money. I mean, two, a lot of people say that they didn't really like it, but it was still a commercial success. And three, hell yeah. A lot of people have said that three is the definitive sequel to one. So a lot of people just jump over, I think it was again, Freddy's Revenge. There's a lot of paranormal elements. I mean, Freddy's a paranormal being in general. And of course, he's again played by Robert Englund. And I'm okay with that because he knows how to play Freddy. I mean, even though like Freddy versus Jason wasn't that great of a film, he still had that persona, that larger than life attitude that just Freddy Krueger demands when he's on screen. The movie, again, is a little slow because it has to set up mental states that each character is in. We have to reestablish Nancy and how she's working at the psychiatric hospital. She meets, what's his name? Neil Gordon, played by Craig Wasson. And I like how they start to show that there's more to both of them than meets the eye. No, they're not Transformers. But it helps for them to work together to kind of subvert the doctor bitch that won't really listen to the kids. Again, adding that thematic thing of adults don't listen to kids, so kids have to lean on each other and are left to their own devices in order to survive. And that's really shown when the killings start to happen. So again, spoilers, if you've never seen this movie, highly recommended. Philip's the first to go, the puppeteer kid. And the scene, the way he dies, it's so horrific because they do this really amazing claymation thing where one of the puppets turns into Freddy. And what he does is he starts to rip all these tendons out of Philip and starts to move him like a marionette. And just watching it, even though you know it's fake, just thinking of all your joint, your tendons and muscles are being pulled on like that, it's enough to make you cringe. And again, going back to how adults don't listen to kids, they're trying to get the orderlies and the nurses' attentions to what's happening to Philip, but everyone's just like, go back to bed. What are you doing? And that leads to Philip's quote unquote, as they write it off, as suicide. The reason, again, what I like is how they bring Nancy back. She gets into this field because of nightmares. You see that she's starting to take this heavy medication. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but it suppresses dreams. So you're sleeping, you're dead to the world. You don't dream, nothing. And she's able to convince Gordon to prescribe it for the kids. But before anything with that can happen, this is where we start to learn more about Jennifer. You learn that she can bring people into her dreams. She brings Nancy into one of her dreams to save her. And the scene, again, where Nancy has to save her, and you see Freddy as this nasty, gritty, ugly, slimy slug. It's a very disturbing scene. And, freaking props to the prop department, no pun intended. They did an excellent job making him look like this big, like Trimmer's earthworm thing trying to eat Jennifer. And so when Nancy learns this, she starts to think about how she can bring all the kids together to beat Freddy. Now, we also have a B plot with this going on where there's a nun. Her name, I don't want to give away because, again, I know this is an 80s film, but there's not a lot of people that have seen it, so I don't want to give it away, but there's a paranormal part to this nun. And she's starting to try to lead the doctor, Dr. Gordon, to different parts of the hospital to try to kind of give this history of Freddy Krueger. And she says the only way to really beat Krueger is you can't really kill him in his dreams. You have to put him to rest. Because if you remember, the reason that Freddy's on this revenge kick is all the parents of Elm Street murdered him for murdering children. He's a serial killer. And so he has to find the bones to rest. The only person that knows the location of the bones, Nancy's father, one of the only surviving adults of Elm Street. And they bring him back, and I'm glad that John Saxon, the character's Donald Thompson, I'm glad that the same actor plays him each time. Though it's tragic to kind of see what's happened to his family since the initial movie. There's his mother, I think the mother, they got separated or she passed away, I can't remember. But he's become a major alcoholic, down on his luck. Cop, very jaded to everything. And you see the rift between him and Nancy. And it's heartbreaking to see what happens to the family unit when tragedy happens and they're not able to healthily, put things back together in a healthy way. Well, some things happen. Again, I don't want to give away the whole film, but it forces Donald to take Dr. Neil to where Freddy is buried. And there's some awesome stop motion and claymation scenes there with skeletons. It kind of reminds me of Army of Darkness as you see this animated skeleton start to beat the crap out of both Neil and Donald. It's hilarious. So while that's going on, Nancy wants to bring all the kids into the dream world because something happens with Joey. What's that? Needless to say, it happens with a naked nurse. It's one of those things where you're just like, oh my, what is going on here? But that beat in the script causes Nancy to finally go into the hospital because she gets fired for reasons, and they have to save him. And you learn that when they are in the dream world, they have powers. Ronald Strong will, because he likes Dungeons and Dragons, he's kind of like a wizard, essentially. Tara sees herself as this dangerous, beautiful, like punk chick that has these awesome blades. And I thought that was kind of a neat little touch. I wish that they could have expounded on it more. But, run times, they don't want to stretch it out too much. But that's what they mean by the Dream Warriors, is they have these special abilities in order to fight Freddy. So while Neil and Donald are fighting the remains of Freddy in the real world, in this dream world, he's getting his ass kicked as well. And the scenes of this, like, hellscape that Freddy creates, very awesome. You can just see that it just screams torment. The color palettes they use for the reds, and then the graveyard, the car graveyard, all the blues. And again, the scenes with the nun, where every time you see her, she's always very lit in like this very bright kind of light type sense to kind of give this angelic effect. Because you see her around, the hospital, graveyards. And again, like I said, the nun has a very key, pivotal part of this movie. And I didn't expect, I knew that there was something special about her, but when the reveal happened, I went, oh, wow. So yeah, that's all I really want to say about Dream Warriors. I didn't want to make this review too long. I absolutely love this film. I just wanted to do a quick recap on some of the parts that I liked. The thematic parts of how adults don't listen to the youth, which they should more, because, sometimes kids see things that adults don't. And I'm learning that a lot with my kid. I'm learning to pay attention to that because of all the stuff that I've seen, in films and just growing up in general. So if you've seen this movie, let us know your thoughts down in the comments. If you haven't seen it, go grab it. I would suggest I think it's $20 right now, you can get the entire Nightmare on Elm Street DVD set at Walmart. That's where I got that and Friday the 13th. Now I just got to find Halloween and I'll be a happy little camper. So if you've enjoyed this review, we really would appreciate if you take a moment to hit like, share, and subscribe. Helps the club channel more than you can possibly know. And if you won't mind hitting that fancy little nightmare bell next to subscribe, that way as we continue to upload content, you guys get notified. Come to the channel, and we love talking with y'all and hearing your thoughts and feedback down in the comments below or our social media pages, which I'll make sure to leave the links down in the description below. So with all that said, thank you so much for stopping by. Hope y'all continue to have an absolutely amazing evening watching movies, and happy viewing, true believers.
I wish to create a perfect human being, selecting the best organs from different corpses.